Good evening and welcome to another Torah study. This week we studied the Torah, the portion of Teruma. This week is a very special Shabbat because aside from the Torah portion, we read one other short portion called Zachor, remember, in which we are commanded by God to remember what Amalekite did to the Jewish people and the mitzvah to wipe Amalekite out, which is sometimes it sounds strange. God commanding us to kill men, women, children, animals that belong to Amalekite. But tonight it's not going to be the topic of our discussion. However, the mitzvah to remember what Amalekite did and that we must wipe them out is a mitzvah incumbent upon every Jew, men and women. And therefore, we fulfill this mitzvah to remember that by listening to the Torah as read just the Shabbat before the holiday of Purim. So everyone is invited, of course, with all the COVID precaution, assuming you're healthy and you don't have any health issues and you're wearing a mask, and there's going to be a space between seats, but you are invited to attend and listen to the Torah reading of that section. In addition, I want to remind you, next Thursday night is Purim. Thursday is a fast day. Thursday night is a Purim celebration. We'll have an indoor and outdoor Megillah reading at the synagogue, and everyone is invited. Friday morning, we have a Purim brunch. That's again COVID style, prepackaged brunch. And if you would like to join, you must make reservations. And the price is going up, I believe, beginning either tonight, tomorrow, or soon. If you didn't make reservations and you want to join, it will cost you more. And now, without any further ado, I want to go back to this week's Torah portion. In this week, we study about God's commanding the Jewish people to take a contribution from the Jewish people in order for them to build a tabernacle, to build a house, a temple for God. The house for God had to be done, to be built exactly to specification, the way God wanted it. In the desert for a total of 900 years about, they have used a temporary dwelling that can be moved around. And later on, they built the first temple in Jerusalem that lasted for 410 years. And about 100 years later, they built a second holy temple that lasted for 420 years. And since then, we don't have a temple. So I want to concentrate on the beginning of this expulsion and try and draw some lessons from the commandment about giving a contribution. The first point I want to make is that when God is commanding the Jewish people to bring contributions so they can build a temple, God is listing material. And he begins with Zahav. Zahav is gold, silver, copper, wool, leather, wood, oil, spices, and it goes on with a total of 15 different items that every Jew can contribute. This is a contribution. There is no minimum, and everyone can do according to their heart's desire. However, anyone who pays attention to the items listed can see that it starts from the highest, the most expensive and highest quality, which is gold. Silver is next, copper is after that. The next one comes Utchelet ve'argaman, different dye, different color, light blue and dark red that they use. Tolat shani, which is an animal, a worm that I forgot you do a very expensive garments out of it, which is linen, not linen. Another type of material garments, and then it comes to wood, acacia wood, and then it goes on to oil and spices. So it goes down in the level of quality, except the last two. The last two are precious stones and precious and shoham stones and filling stones for the apron. These are very, very expensive precious stones. The commentators are bothered by the fact that they appear last. Shouldn't they be first? If the order as it follows for the previous 13 are all in highest going down, why the last two are precious stones, which are either greater than gold or at least equal to gold, yet they appear in the last, they appear last on the list. And the rabbis, an explanation given by many rabbis, is that the precious stones came to the Jewish people without any toil. Clouds dropped precious stones. When they needed the precious stones for the garments of the high priest, 12 on his breastplate and two large ones on each side of his shoulders on the apron, those stones, they couldn't find them. And God made a miracle, and clouds brought down the word. The leaders actually donated it, but the word leaders in Hebrew is Nesiim. But in the text in the Torah, it's missing one letter. Nesiim, it's supposed to be with two yuds and has one yud. So if you remove the yud, you can actually read it as clouds. The word Nesiim in Hebrew is also another word for clouds. The clouds brought those precious stones and dropped them in the desert, and the leaders of the tribes were able to find them and bring them to Moshe as their contribution. Therefore, because it wasn't something they sweated to earn, and it wasn't something that they worked hard to get, their value is considered as the last one of all the 15 items. And the message is very clear. When we are going to do what's something right, when we want to serve God, we need to take into the account how toil and hardship. And in fact, the harder it gets, the greater it counts. That's why God is the only judge. God is the only one who can reward us, because we both might be keeping kosher, yet for someone it might be silk. Thank you. Lorraine, thank you for pointing it out. So because the effort involved in serving God is part of the equation, therefore those precious stones that had no hardship, no loss financially, they are listed as the last of the 15. And that's why, according to commentary, and I shared it previous year, so I don't want to spend the time on that about this, that many times we find that gold, silver, and copper actually may not necessarily be the metal commodity that you and I talk about, but it's all about the same, except it depends when we give it. And again, very briefly, another year or a couple of years, I'll share it in details. The word gold in Hebrew means Zeh Hanoten Bari, someone who is perfectly healthy and he wants to come closer to God and do what God says. That's the highest quality of giving. The second one is Kesef. Kesef is silver. Kesef is an acronym. Ksheyesh sakana podeh. When he's in danger, he comes to God and says, I'll make a contribution, make me healthy. In other words, it's a give and take. He's giving, but he wants something back. That's the quality of silver. It's kind of iffy. You know, you're asking for something in return. Nechoshet, which is copper, refers to the level of giving when he says, Netinat cholesh amartnu, someone who is on the last will and testament, he says, after my life, I want to give all, when I cannot enjoy my estate and my savings and all my good fortune, I'm going to contribute it for a good cause. At that point, that whatever the person gives is considered like copper, because this is a point where he or she cannot benefit from it, and that's why they're willing to relinquish all that their assets, and therefore it's considered like copper. Anyway, so I wanted to move on to the next topic. So that's why the precious stones are considered last on the list after everything else, because even though financially they had much greater value and perhaps more than anything else, yet they did not involve any hardship, challenge, expenditure, and therefore they are considered last on the list. And it teaches us that we should not measure our achievements and connection to God based on comparison to others, but just do as best as we can, realizing that the efforts we put in, earnest effort, will be counted by God in a great way. I want to move on to the next topic. There is something very peculiar about this week's portion. The beginning of the portion, the second verse, God tells Moshe, speak to the children of Israel and have them dedicate to me a contribution. Take my offering from every person whose heart inspired them to generosity. And there were three types of contributions that the Jewish people must participate, and there is no exception. One can ask, why is it that in the desert, every Jew had all his needs provided by God? God provided food, God provided drink, God provided health, God provided the garments grew with them. They had a laundry machine in the cloud. They would put their garments and they will come fresh new. Children will grow with their outfits. There was not a single need that was not met for the Jewish people. They needed to see a doctor. They had the best doctor. They had no problem with health insurance. They had the best one, 100% coverage, no deduction. They had no issue to worry about that, and they had no reason to pay for anything. Why is it suddenly here we find that they have to give? Not only that, they are going to be forced to give. It is actually for the people who lived in the desert, the only time they had to spend money or give something. Just remember, manna was provided free. Quail was given them for free every day. Health, sustenance, all those, everything that a human being acquires through payments was given to them without any pay. What's wrong with building God's temple without them paying for it? Why is it that God says, take it from them? And in fact, they were forced, they were not given a choice. The Lubavitch Rebbe points out that the purpose of them building the temple was to connect to God. And a connection can be established only when it's a two-way street. There is no such thing as I am fall in love with somebody and I expect that they will do and give and provide. There is no relationship. And the same is the other way. If I fall in love with somebody and I'm the one who's providing and giving and doing, there is no way this relationship can last. God wanted that the Jewish people to demonstrate that they are willing to connect, to give back. And that's why it is the only opportunity given to the Jewish people to show God that they have a healthy relationship. How do they do that? By building a house for God with their own money, with their own efforts. Actually, they had to follow the blueprint that God provided with all the furniture specifically to the material and the sizes and the weight, etc. But they had to do it themselves, except those parts that they could not because it was too difficult, that God himself assisted. Says the Rebbe that we find it in the temple, there are four most important articles or pieces of furniture that each demonstrate the idea of tzedakah, of doing something for somebody else. And therefore, it applies for us today. God is expecting us to act, even though we don't have a temple and we can't build a tabernacle for God because there was only one time. Yet, our mission is to realize that there is something God is demanding of us. And we need to thank God for all that he provides us, the health, the happiness, all that we are possessed in our life, by expressing and building a tabernacle, a house for God, and placing those four articles in this universe. Says the Rebbe, the key word for all that is tzedakah, doing charity, being kindness. And I want to share with you tonight 4 different ways of acting in kindness towards a fellow human being. and they all are in the tabernacle the way they are described in this week's portion. The four items I'm going to talk about are the most important components of the temple, and they are a table. There was a table on which the bread, 12 loaves of showbread. It's called showbread because they were in a U shape. You can see someone on the other side. You can see through it. So it's the table. The second one is the altar. The third is the menorah, and finally the ark, the holy ark. These are the four articles that make the place a holy place. Even though we don't have a temple, we can resemble the acts of each one of those four in the way we do tzedakah, acting kindly towards another. And here is how it goes. The table represents wealth, financial wealth. How do I know? Because the table, according to the Torah, if you read, we read in this week's portion about the table that they had to have a gold surrounding, a gold bar around the table. And the reason God wanted to make that gold bar around the top of the table is because it represents wealth. When you want to say in Hebrew, someone who is very, very wealthy, you say that his table is a king's table, meaning that he has plenty of financial means. But that's why the Talmud tells us that in the temple, the menorah was on the south side. The table was on the north side. And the Talmud tells us someone who wants to become rich, when they sit in the synagogue, they should sit in the north part of the synagogue. And someone who wants to become smart should sit on the south side. If you notice, the rabbi in the synagogue always sits, or in any synagogue I've been to that follow Jewish tradition. I'm not talking about places who make up whatever they want. But in Jewish tradition, where I grew up and the way I do, the rabbi always sits on the south side, because the rabbi wants to acquire more knowledge. The rabbi is not wealthy. People who care about wealth and they want to be very wealthy, when they pray, they sit on the north side of the synagogue, because the north is where the table is situated in the temple, and a table represents wealth, financial wealth. Therefore, this is one way of building a table in the world that God gave us. And that is when we are blessed with great wealth, to share it with those who are less fortunate. Literally giving tzedakah in the simple form, writing a check, swiping a credit card, sending a PayPal to a needy family, someone who has to undergo a medical procedure, you help them. Someone who needs to pay bills, you help them, etc. This is represented by building. That's how we build a table in the universe. The second one is the altar. The altar represents another kind of giving for a human being, where the person is giving not just financially, but from himself. In fact, the altar was a place where animals sacrificed. Animals were placed on the altar. The Torah tells us that whenever someone brought in an atonement or a sacrifice, they would say verbally that, may God atone for my sins, because my blood and body parts were supposed to be consumed by God as punishment, but I hope that it will be transformed into the animal that's placed on the altar. Meaning, and according to Rav Sheshes, or a famous rabbi, he would fast and say, God, there is no temple today. I cannot bring an animal sacrifice. So let's hope that I may it be your will that the loss of my blood and my body weight, because I fast, should be considered as if I brought it on the altar as a sacrifice. In other words, sacrifices on the altar represent our own body being placed on the altar. What it represents in this universe when we want to build a tabernacle for God today is giving of ourselves to someone else. For example, Today we have an opportunity to donate plasma. People donate kidney. Someone would donate their hair to assist with people who lose hair because they go through a they face a disease that to the process of healing they go through a whatever the word. I'm sorry, it's the end of the day for me. So they need help with hair so they can wear a wig so they are able to go outdoors and socialize. There are many ways in which we are able to help by not just giving financially, but giving of ourselves, donating blood, as I mentioned, plasma. Even if someone is able and is healthy enough to save a life by donating a kidney, these are opportunities for us to bring a sacrifice on the altar, to create an altar. So that's the second one of the important parts of the temple. Chemotherapy. Thank you very much, Eileen and Lorraine. So I spoke about two. The first is the table in the tabernacle represent wealth. The second one is the altar represent giving of my body, myself. The third one I want to talk about is the menorah. Menorah represented light. What's so special about light? Anytime you find joy, it is about light. That's why every time, let's start with Shabbat. We must light candles during the celebration of Shabbat. What's the reason we light Shabbat candles? Because we want to usher into a day of joy and pleasure. You cannot enjoy the day unless there is lights in the house. And Tisha B'Av, the saddest day of the year, part of the tradition is to turn off lights and have very little light, because sadness is represented by darkness. That's why every time there is a Jewish celebration, there is going to be candles. It's not a centerpiece, it's just to add light. That's why discos, anytime there is a party, you will see lights and all kinds of colors, because light adds to the joy and the warmth and the connection of people. Light, candle, is a very, very powerful object in our universe that can help bring joy. The goal is for us to bring joy in this universe. That's how we kindle a menorah in this universe, in God's universe. When we are able to make sure that our day begins with joy and ends with joy, and we find every opportunity to rejoice and to bring joy to others as well, we are celebrating, or we are so to say, building a menorah in God's universe. And that's the third one. The fourth one is the ark, the holy ark. That's why, by the way, when it talks about menorah, when we help the poor by Jewish law, the Talmud tells us, if you help the poor by giving them a coin or a bill, but your face is down and you are upset or angry that you have to give them, there is a very harsh punishment from God, God forbid. In other words, when we bring help to someone, we must do it with a light, with shiny, happy face. Just that we care about, express our care, that we care, express that we love the person and we want to help them willingly. This is part of the mitzvah. It applies not only to tzedakah, it applies to the study of Torah and the celebration of a holiday and the prayer. We must realize that menorah, joy, light, must be embedded in every part of our day-to-day life. And finally, the last one is the ark. The ark represents the study of Torah. We have a mitzvah to study Torah, but also to impact others by teaching them Torah. By Jewish law, if you read the Shema, it says, "V'shinantam levanecha," teach your sons, v'dibarta bam, and then you study Torah. The mitzvah to teach your son, and it's not about children, it's about strangers, come before your own study. In fact, the Talmud tells us that a man must devote more time to teaching and less time into studying. because the mitzvah of teaching others comes before studying yourself. The study of Torah is a gift that God gave us, and therefore we're not allowed to charge. There's a whole debate. How is it possible to teach, to charge for teachers who teach Torah to children and adults? And there is a whole discussion on that, because God gave us the Torah without charging us for free. And one of the conditions he made is that we always share the Torah without charging anybody. So the fourth part of the universe, in order for us to create a tabernacle, is by creating an ark that contains the Torah, that contains the 10 Commandments and the Torah scroll, by making sure we open it up to people who are not as knowledgeable, people who don't know about the Torah as much as we do. And we realize that this is an obligation incumbent upon everyone. So I just want to conclude that in the temple that God commanded us to build, as you read in this portion, there are 4 articles, starting with the table, then goes the altar, then comes the menorah, and finally comes the ark, the holy ark. Each one can be reconstructed by our deeds in every day of our life. The table is through wealth, when we share our wealth with people who are less fortunate. The altar is when we give of ourselves, donating whatever it is that we have, and even time and energy and talent. The menorah light is to bring joy and happiness, because light equals joy. And finally, the ark represents the 10 Commandments and the Torah scroll, sharing the Torah with anyone who might be willing to study with us and learn more. And with that, I would like to conclude and wish everyone Shabbat Shalom. And I hope that we always share and meet for happy occasions. Shabbat Shalom, everybody.
Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom, Rabbi.